So we have different states in life, okay? And they go up and down. It's not just a line like that. It's not just simply up and down. There's other variances, right? But in terms of intensity of emotion, sometimes you're like, you have a really intense emotion, it can be negative or positive. Sometimes not so intense, right?
Yeah.
And so what I will say is this. Your life, in terms of most people's experience, is fundamentally disintegrating you. Everyday life disintegrates you. It splits you because of this. Just think of this. Have you ever heard this, Tim? Do you know what it means for memory to be state dependent? You're taking psychology, right? Did you ever say that? When I learned memory was state dependent.
Yeah.
You know what that means? Anybody know what that means?
It's like you tie it to whatever state you're in at the time.
Right. So an example is this. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, and I had a big long conversation because I have talks to everybody and I ask every question of every smart person I can. So I went to the sleep clinic, and we had nothing to do. You're sitting around waiting to go to bed. So I'm talking with this really smart guy who's a sleep researcher. And we got in a conversation. Eventually he was talking about how he learned how to learn. And he said he had this secret that he learned from psychology where one of the best ways to trigger a state, the sense that is most triggering of any state is your sense of smell, right? And that's why we use cologne, because we want people to have a good state about us. And it makes us feel good as well. So, like if you have a sexy cologne, you feel kind of sexy yourself, and yep. Oh yeah. So anyways, he said every test I studied for, I bought a different kind of cologne.
Wow.
And he's like, I would take that cologne, and every time I studied, I'd dip a little bit and like put it on. I don't know what he did. He made it so he would smell it when he was studying, right? And then when I went to take the test, I took that, boom, and it gave this consistent state where, because memory is state dependent.
Yeah.
So the cologne would trigger one state, boom, boom, boom. All the studying, boom, boom, boom. And he would take the test, boom. And he said, and it was like total recall for him, because it was getting the exact same state. If you're going to drink beer while you're studying, you better drink the exact same amount of beer
taking the test.
when you take the test.
Yep.
Beer is not a nootropic. It does not increase your intelligence.
Stop.
Sorry. I'm increasing your consciousness in a painful way. No. But anyways, even then it can help you if it somehow joins aspects of your consciousness in a helpful way, right? And so what you look here is, the problem is, you're up and down, but especially in the extreme states, right here, these points, your consciousness is almost entirely isolated in your extreme states of mind. Because especially when you're here, and when you're here, you remember these dips. And so just think about this for a second. How has anybody ever said, you always do this, blah, 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 blah? And they start like yelling, and they're saying you always, right? Well, if you were in here, you would know that was irrational. But when you say that, you're never that way, right? So it's irrational. You just ask somebody, really, I always do that? Well, and then suddenly they're switching to their rational brain, and they're starting to double check to say, well, is that really true? But in the moment they said it, it was their reality, 100%. Even as logical as it was. Why? Because in that moment, there was one band of reality that matched every single similar experience in their life. And that was all they remembered. That's what we mean by memory is state dependent. Yeah. So just remember this. What does that really mean? When you're in the normal band of reality, it's a little less extreme. These are not available to you. You're split. In that respect, all those memories are not even part of your conscious repertoire. They're not available to you to use all these things. What I would say is that as we start to experiment with our own states, as we say, you know what, the place that I said I would never go, that's too dark for me, if I start to go there, it is going to be painful, but I'm going to start to reintegrate it into a full self. Okay? And so when it's dark, it's too dark because it's split. And then when I'm not out there, I don't remember it at all. What you want is something a little more balanced, where your reality is fuller. Your memory of all these things is fuller. You have the full perspective of the most extremes because you don't split them off. And so what you're doing is you're revisiting, you're connecting even your states and your memory of all these things. You're trying to say, you know what? It would be valuable to remember those down things.
Yeah.
Instead of, have you ever met the person that's like totally not aware, and they forget that every time something happens, like every time they get in a certain position, they always fail. And so, but when they're not in that failure, they're thinking to themselves, I can do it, and they're not wrong. They probably can't do it. They just forget that every time they're in that position, they never are able to do what they really wanted to do. And they think somehow it's going to be different, right? But the problem is that they don't have access to that state of mind, right? And so what you're wanting is that your everyday normal state, in that you have access to the super highs and the super lows. You know, the same thing, like, I don't know, what's a really great high state? So often we forget what that was like, and we kind of remember it, but we don't have the lessons from that either. We don't realize that perhaps maybe, you know, have you ever felt kind of crappy, but you don't want to do the thing that need necessary to feel good?
Yeah. You just want to, yeah.
Like, it's kind of like this addictive feeling, right? At that point in time, you don't have access to that. Like, you know what, it's an elevated state. It might not be that pleasurable, but it's just elevated. You feel really well, right? And so you know every time you run, you feel really well.
Yeah,
but like, you've been busy and you're kind of stressed out, and the last thing you want to do is go running, even though you know it's going to make you well. Or for me, like, it used to be like, I would come home and I was exhausted from work. And I had 6 kids and my wife, and I would go straight and watch a video on Netflix for hours. While my kids are running around, they need dad, they need mom, and you know what? You know what happens at the end of those 3 hours? I try to fall asleep, but I can't because I'm way overstimulated.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, oh, I was watching this exciting little movie, and I feel like a piece of crap because I know I did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know, like, here my kids, they need me, right? And so you're thinking to yourself, well, why did I do this? I know this wasn't good it wasn't good for me, it wasn't good for them. I love them, they're needing me, you know? And I knew that if I had just spent a whole night with them, where we played games, we ate some food together, we had conversations, and trust me, it's hard to have conversations with some of my kids sometimes. They're a little on the crazy side, you know what I'm saying?
Same.
But did I decide to or not? Did I try at least? You know, did I take some solace in just trying and enjoy it or not? I was not accessing my higher levels. I was not able to at that point in time, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to join myself as an integrated person so that I have access to what I need to do the right thing that's going to really make my life amazing, like truly amazing. I can assure you, as exciting as that movie I watched, I'm telling you, it was not in any way living. I was not alive. I was just dead. I was trying to escape actual consciousness and reality. I just wanted to escape it, right? I was overwhelmed, I was tired, all that, right? But at the end of the day, I needed to go back in. I just say, no, this is okay. I'm going to reassociate to the pain so that I'm not split and making these stupid decisions. I'm going to reassociate also simultaneously to the pleasure. You know, the idea that I can have real pleasure. It might not be intense, like a, whatever, intense pleasure, but it's going to be something that's sustainable, that just gives me so much internal energy, allows me to do much higher energy things in the long run, really, allows me to do other hard things. It's one of that positive feedback loop we talked about, where it feeds into each other, right? And so when we're dealing with pain, we're reconnecting at all levels. And we're getting access to new levels of kind of awareness, memories, and all these things, versus like the natural things that happen. We're just naturally, based on the way we work, we tend to remember these extreme things only when we're feeling extreme. The problem is, how do we get there? The certain things we want to feel, we can't remember. And so we don't have that urge to go there unless we choose to experience both, where we associate into like gratitude and love and kindness as a matter of habit, and also associate into the pain as a matter of habit. Either one, because when you want the better, you can't even remember it to have a desire to move towards it and make the decision. And when you want to get away from the worst, usually you do things that make you feel worse, but in trying to escape it, versus going towards it and then feeling better and getting access to everything else. I don't know. If I'm confusing myself. It's very complex.
Yeah, no, it's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
And my question is, I'm trying to figure out how to word it. So with like the disassociating from those, like the highs and the lows, how do you utilize like understanding that to building like discipline? Because like for me, like that's something I struggle with, and like this is obviously a much more minor level for me, because my highs and lows, obviously being younger, are not as extreme. So for instance, it might be like when I was younger, like doing chores or something, or like procrastinating on like schoolwork. And like I knew that like at the high, like it felt good. I would turn my assignments, I'd have my stuff set up, I'd have my chores done,
Yeah.
I'd like help out around the house, like help my aunt, like when I was a little bit younger. And I would still like avoid that because like kind of like what they're like, I would disassociate from like the feeling
Yeah.
of accomplishing my stuff and doing what I needed to do. And then like how does that relate to discipline, where like kind of what you said, like you do experience the pain or whatever, and then you become a more full person because you can remember the states of like the top
Yeah.
and the bottom.
Yeah.
Is building discipline like remembering the high and like trying to achieve that, or like avoiding the bottom?
Dude, that's really
I don't know how
insightful
to
question.
explain
No,
that.
the question is absolutely insanely great, and that's why I wanted you here. That is a great question. So, and that's actually the whole purpose of what we're doing. Like, I don't want to just talk about a bunch of cool ideas that could be life-changing if you implemented them. I don't know whether we'll get to all of it, but the whole point of being here was that we would actually take time and start to create a vision, right? Because at some point in time, in the midst of all these ideas floating around, and some of them will hit better than others, it might take another year or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 before some of them actually hit you the way you need them to, right?
Yeah.
You have to be patient with that, right? So some of it, you're going to remember like a year later, and you're like, I remember Amy talking about that, or I read a book about that, right? Like they don't just all fall into place, and this super complex organization just boom, and you're like, here I am, I just heard it once, and now I am a different person. Just going here doesn't change you fundamentally in an instance in your brain. So the question is, like, I'm kind of getting is like, how do we go from kind of understanding these general principles to now making it into like a discipline to where like I'm actually making progress on this, I'm not doing these things, right? And I will say some things. I've been really successful in many respects in this, and there's a pattern that we're going to work through in terms of creating really a vision in every area of your life, how you want to think, feel, and do, and why. That's a big part of your emotion. That's a part of the why deals with the feel, right? But you want to describe it. You want to describe it. Describe how you're going to get there, and then why. Okay. And then in your mind, you need to live it as much as you can. Discipline comes to a daily habit of reviewing that. To the extent that you can, you review it. And you want to review it such that you imagine you thinking this way, feeling this way, and doing this way. Mm-hmm. And when you do, you start to create new neural circuits. Sports science is pretty conclusive that you can get almost as good of results just by thinking about doing a sport action as itself. Sometimes better, also sometimes worse, but almost as good in general, okay? So there's a part of you that your subconscious doesn't really seem to make that much differentiation between something you imagine and something that actually happened, okay? At least parts of your subconscious don't. I don't think that you truly don't know, but in terms of how it responds, if you imagine something that tastes a certain way that you like, you're going to start salivating. If you imagine something disgusting to you, you will think of something disgusting. If you imagine a lemon, your lips will pucker. All these things are totally within our repertoire, and you're a genius at it. If you imagine strong enough that you're getting burnt via hypnosis they can use, you kind of get in a state and create this really strong picture, and it feels real. Your brain is so powerful that things you never thought possible, you thought it only happened because you were getting burnt right here, well, you can raise a blister on the back of your hand just by imagining it.
Really?
Yes, because you actually stimulate the pain center of your brain when you imagine something painful. And when you do, it's going to send a signal back that says, a 4-alarm fire, send liquid, open up this thing so we can create some inflammation, which inflammation in the short term is healing. Inflammation, which is what a blister is, right? So all this liquid from your body just, boom, and it'll just send it right there. It's not the actual breakage that causes it. It's your internal physiological response that will raise that blister, right? And so at the end of the day, and part of what I want to get into is your imagination. You use your imagination. Number one, you want to connect to your imagination, which is in basically all your 5 senses, but you're imagining that this is happening, right? Use all your 5 senses. And learning to work with your imagination is connecting back to your creative self, It's learning to, you use intuition, you use your imagination to envision things that then direct your subconscious, cause you to feel certain things, create new connections in your brain, all these things. So learning to turn up the dial in your imagination, which most people have forgotten about because it's distracting when you're young and you're an ADD kid or whatever. You know, it's not really good for modern day society in many respects because it's too internal, it cuts you off. But you need to have times when you use your imaginations to drive you to the types of things and success that you want. And so that's God-given. That's how we were created, to use this imagination. It's just that usually we really never notice it. So it's both learning the images that you already think and then learning how to manipulate them to choose to kind of like think a certain way, be a certain way, all that.
But everybody kind of does that now, because like in business, you have like a vision or how you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
to some degree, people do that. Without
Yeah.
Really acknowledging it as a.
Yeah. There's also different flavors. I think experimenting with it all starts to connect you to that, so that you live in the pictures every day. You see a vision, right? If you don't have that vision, then all you really can do is respond in the default way that you have in the past, and that's not going to bring you where you're going to go, right? So in this case, we need to know why we're doing this. Why are we going to cause this pain for ourselves? Because pain always presents a decision to either go to the default or choose that I am going to now, instead of having post-traumatic stress disorder, I am going to have post-traumatic growth, right? And the growth is simply rewiring how you deal with pain. So now pain is a part of you, but it doesn't destroy you or split you, right? And that's, think of what an emotionally mature individual is. Think of like a high-up executive who just, it seems like no matter what hits him, the news and the media, this is, that's, you know, the stockholders are having a meeting and they're trying, you know, and you have to bring your game to, like, you know, you show up in the morning and you see one of your team members, your employees, is like destroyed by something. They're struggling with a drug addiction, or they lost, and you're thinking to yourself, like, how do I handle all this? How do I go up and down? And I have my own fears and all these things, right? And so if you're a trauma-based individual, that causes you to lock up and shut down. Because all those feelings, those hard to deal with things in life, just cause you to go whoop, and you can't empathize with someone outside of you. You can't deal with these hard and fearful things that are threats. You know what I'm saying? You disconnect from all of them, right? And where do you need to be if you have a severe threat that takes everything you need?
Mindful in the moment.
Totally in the moment, right? And is disassociating and no longer experiencing and kind of saying, this feeling's bad, that's feeling bad, I'm not going to feel that, blah, 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 blah. And suddenly you shrink down, your consciousness shrinks. You're not going to have what you need. Instead,